I'm 22, a female, and live in London and have done for 4 years. I was coming home from a gig one Wednesday night. It was probably around 11:30 and had just made my switch to my final tube line of the night. It was fairly busy. I'd say probably around 10 or so people in the same carriage as me. I sit down on the flip-out seats nearest the door. As I've just been to a gig, I'm a little tipsy, but definitely not drunk. I'm pretty cautious of my surroundings. There's a couple of gals sat opposite me, and a smallish man. Everyone looks fairly normal. The man gets up though and flips out the seat next to me and sits down. Now, to put me into context, I'm a 5'8" competitive weightlifter, and this evening I was wearing all black with a leather jacket and heavy boots. To be honest, I look like I'm in a lesbian biker gang or something, and if someone was going to attack anyone, I would be a fair challenge. So when this little dude sits down next to me, I'm like, okay, a bit weird that he moved from the more comfortable seats to the shitty flippy out ones, but whatever. I quickly glance over to him and he doesn't look crazy. He doesn't smell of anything. He doesn't look high and he's dressed pretty well. But he just sits there, completely angled towards me, like he's turned as far in my direction as he can be. I can feel his gaze, like boring a hole into the side of my head. I have my headphones in and I just look straight ahead. But then he starts twitching, like someone with Tourette's stifling a tick. So I'm genuinely put at ease for a little while. However, with the twitching, he starts biting his hand, and again I'm like, it's just a tick thing. But then he just sinks his teeth in, flesh, blood, and everything. He loosens his hold on his hand and then twitches and bites down again. So naturally, I'm like, I'm gonna get the fuck off this sealed underground container. So I get off at the next stop. The stop I actually need to get off at is the one a couple after this one. I walk off the platform as if I'm leaving, so he'd think I was leaving. Because I was on the Victoria line, I just assumed that another tube would be along in the next couple of minutes. However, it wasn't, and I didn't want to miss the last train home, so I go to another way onto the platform and get back on the same train a few cars down. Now, when I got off the first car, the creepy guy looked at me super weirdly, kind of like longingly. I can't even place the kind of look it was, really. It just freaked me the fuck out. So we get to the next stop and I see this guy walking down the platform. Now, at 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday night, when you're alone, you barrel down the platform to the exit as quickly as you can move. Nobody really wants to hang about down there. So when I see the creepy guy just ambling down the platform at the next stop, it tells me that something is off. He's walking, looking around, looking dejected, and then he clocks me. It becomes painfully apparent to him that I've moved down the train to get away from him. Luckily, the doors had just closed, but he makes eye contact with me and starts shrieking and banging on the closed doors, blood from his bitten hand smearing everywhere as the train pulled away. That sight has rattled me, and has continued to do so months after this all happened. I don't know what that guy's problem was, or what the hell he was doing on that platform, the platform that I normally get off at, but it's really freaky. So, this happened about 10 years ago when I was 17, I think. It was a Friday night, and a friend was driving me home from a party. Neither of us had anything to drink, something I should clarify early. We turned into my street at about 11 p.m. This street is a dead end in a very bushy area, with very minimal lighting, so it's quite pretty during the day, but just really unsettling at night. And topping off the creepy factor was a swing that hung from a large tree in front of a house at the top of the street as you turn in. It had been there longer than I was born, and though it was quite rickety, it still seemed functional. Having said that, I don't have any concrete memories of it being used in the past 5 or 10 years. I'd always joke about how creepy this swing was to people when we went past it, but this time it was even creepier because as we drove past, there was a little girl sitting on it. She looked upset and just had her head hanging down, slowly swinging but not letting her feet off the ground. She slowly looked up as we drove past and kind of just gave us a glare. She would have been no older than 8, and as unusual as it was for her to be out this late, my friend and I both assumed that she had a fight with her parents and was sulking outside or something. And ultimately, we just didn't really care enough or think it that important at the time. My friend kept driving for another 15 seconds till we reached my house halfway down the street, about 250 meters from the swing. We stopped outside my driveway, facing the top of the street, but as often happened, we ended up sitting in the car chatting about school, girls, and all that stuff that felt super deep and meaningful at that age. About 10 minutes into our conversation, we noticed some movement at the top of the street as the girl got off the swing and walked into the middle of the road. She turned and started slowly walking towards us. As I mentioned, the street was dimly lit, with only 3 street lamps between her and the car, which meant that for several seconds while she walked towards us, we couldn't see her, and she would emerge far closer than she had been before she stepped into the darkness. I drew attention to it and joked about how creepy it was, my friend laughing along. The ring had only come out a couple of years prior, and the fact that she was pale and in a white dressing gown just accentuated it. Really, the only difference was her wispy blonde hair. As she emerged into the light of the second closest street lamp, about 100 meters away, the tone definitely changed though. We were both still laughing somewhat, but it was definitely more nervous, and we were whispering, "Oh shit, oh fuck," as she got closer. It was far less funny because somehow this little girl clearly wasn't a little girl. She was actually an adult woman, probably in her late 50s, early 60s if I had to guess. It was unmistakably the same person though that was on the swing. We'd seen her get up off it, but it was as if she'd aged 50 years as she walked down the street towards us. She was also clearly looking in our direction, but squinting because of the car headlights, so she probably couldn't see us directly. The woman was now about 20 meters away, and I could see her a lot more clearly in the car's headlights. She looked slightly haggard, and the outside of her eyes were reddish, as if she'd been crying or hadn't slept for a while. As she drew closer to us with each meter, I couldn't stop thinking that that was 100% a little girl 20 minutes ago. What the actual fuck was going on here? These were all thoughts that I didn't verbalize at the time, obviously, but it was clear that we were both getting creeped out by this. When she was about 5 meters away, my friend turned the car engine off, auto-locked the doors and turned the headlights off. Continuing to nervously giggle, we slouched into our seats as the woman scowled in our direction, walking right past the car, mumbling something to herself. After about 5 seconds, we sat upright, laughing at the situation now that we were confident it was just creepy and not dangerous. My friend commented that she seemed drunk, which I accepted, and we continued to talk for a few minutes, but I was still somewhat unsettled. I didn't look back to see where the woman was, but I knew that this was a dead-end street and that there was nowhere for this woman to have gone. I knew for a fact that she didn't live in any of the houses that way too, but hoped that maybe she was just visiting or something. By this stage, my friend and I had shifted in our seats so that we were facing each other. But then, suddenly, like a jump scare in a horror movie, I saw the woman quickly emerge from behind my friend's head and stare right at me through the driver's window. She cocked her head as if she was curious at my reaction and leaned forward till her nose was almost touching the glass.
"Holy fuck!"
I exclaimed, jumping up and shaking the car. My friend's eyes and mouth went wide and he slowly turned around. But by then, she had stumbled about a meter away from the car and was no longer looking at us. So it was far less disturbing to look at, all things considered anyway. We sat in silence and just watched her continue to stumble off until she was in the gap of darkness between the first and the second streetlight. Even after waiting about 5 minutes, we never saw her emerge, but at that point, we just called it a night. Me bolting from my car to my house, and my friend driving at full speed with his doors locked. Since then, I've told a few people that story as a fun anecdote about how freaky my street is, and every time I pass that swing to this day, I think about it. I've reconciled that clearly we just didn't see the woman properly at first, and she wasn't the young 8-year-old that we thought we saw. But when my friend and I still talk about it, there's an underlying sense of, no, we totally did see her, and I mean every time that we talk.